Elias Thorne laughed, a hollow sound echoing in his vast, empty home. Nothing, he believed, could truly touch him any more. Not after the profound loss that had stripped his world bare, leaving only the echoes of a love that was no more. Yet, 6-year-old Lily, her small voice trembling in the quietude of her nursery, would soon utter words that would shatter his carefully constructed indifference, piercing through the walls he had built around his heart, and change everything he thought he knew forever. His private jet had just touched down, the familiar hum of its engines fading into the background as his sleek black car whisked him through the city's glittering arteries, away from the demanding boardrooms and the suffocating weight of global finance. He was home, or what passed for it now, a sprawling mansion nestled amidst manicured lawns, a monument to his relentless ambition and an unwitting testament to his profound loneliness. The opulent silence of his mansion felt heavier than usual as Elias stepped through the grand oak doors, the click of his expensive shoes on the marble floor, the only sound in the cavernous foyer. A strange, disquieting stillness hung in the air, a stark contrast to the bustling energy he usually encountered, even in the quiet hours. Mrs. Gable, their long-standing housekeeper, was nowhere to be seen, nor was the usual faint scent of freshly baked cookies or polished wood. An invisible hand seemed to grip his chest, a cold dread seeping into his bones, replacing the weariness of travel with a terrifying certainty that something was terribly wrong. He moved through the hushed corridors, his senses heightened, every shadow seeming to lengthen, every creak of the old house amplifying the growing unease within him. The silence not peaceful, but a void, pregnant with unspoken fears. He instinctively headed towards the children's wing, his heart quickening with each step. As he approached Lily's nursery, a faint, almost imperceptible sound reached him, a muffled whimper. He paused, his breath catching in his throat, straining to hear. Then, clearer this time, a child's voice, small and fragile, pierced the silence, a hushed plea that sent a shiver down his spine. "Please, Mrs. Gable, no more." The words were barely audible, a desperate whisper hanging in the air. Elias felt a jolt of pure terror, his blood turning to ice. He pushed open the heavy oak door, his eyes scanning the room, and there she was, his precious Lily, huddled in a corner of her bed, her small shoulders trembling, her face tear-streaked and pale. A faint, purplish mark blossomed on her delicate wrist, an angry bruise against her porcelain skin. His gaze then shifted to the crib in the corner, where his infant son, Leo, usually a picture of serene slumber, lay awake, his tiny face contorted in a desperate wail, one that spoke not of hunger or discomfort, but of profound distress. The sight of his children, so vulnerable and clearly distressed, struck Elias like a physical blow. The titan of industry, who commanded respect and fear in boardrooms across continents, felt utterly helpless, a profound wave of guilt washing over him. He had been so consumed by his work, by the intricate dance of numbers and deals, by the relentless pursuit of more, that he had allowed himself to be emotionally distant, a ghost in his own home. He had buried his grief for Clara, his beloved wife, who had departed during the birth of their second child, beneath a mountain of ambition, believing that providing material wealth was enough, that Mrs. Gable's seemingly capable hands were a sufficient substitute for his own presence, his own love. He had been a widower, a father, but truly he had been an absentee, a man lost in his own sorrow, oblivious to the quiet suffering unfolding under his very roof. Mrs. Gable had always presented herself as the epitome of dedication, a woman whose stern demeanor was softened by an almost unwavering commitment to the children's well-being. She had been with the family for years, a fixture in their lives, a seemingly indispensable part of their household. Elias had trusted her implicitly, a trust born of convenience and his own emotional unavailability. He had seen her as a rock, a steady presence for Lily and Leo in the turbulent wake of Clara's departure. But the scene before him, the raw fear in Lily's eyes, the faint mark on her wrist, and Leo's inconsolable cries, shattered that illusion with brutal force. It was as if a veil had been ripped away, revealing a dark, insidious truth lurking beneath the surface of their meticulously ordered lives. His mind raced, replaying countless moments, searching for clues, for any sign he might have missed, any whisper of the sinister reality that had been unfolding in his absence. The sheer audacity of the situation, the betrayal of trust, began to fuel a cold, simmering rage within him, a primal instinct to protect his children at all costs. The comfortable narrative he had built around his life, one of controlled success and manageable grief, was crumbling, replaced by a horrifying discovery that demanded immediate, unwavering action. This was not just a domestic incident. This was a war for the innocence and safety of his precious children, and Elias Thorne, for the first time in a long time, felt truly awake. The chilling whisper of his daughter, the stark bruise on her wrist, and Leo's desperate cries tore through the carefully constructed facade of Elias Thorne's life, exposing the gaping wound of his own neglect. He knelt by Lily's bed, his large hand gently tracing the angry mark, a silent apology forming in his mind, though no words could adequately express the depth of his regret. His heart, long dormant beneath layers of grief and ambition, now throbbed with a fierce, protective instinct he hadn't realized he possessed. He gathered Lily into his arms, her small body trembling against his, and for the first time in years, he felt the profound weight of fatherhood, not as a burden, but as a sacred trust he had unknowingly betrayed. He murmured soft assurances, promises of safety and unwavering presence, his voice thick with a raw emotion that surprised even himself. The world outside, with its endless demands and cutthroat deals, suddenly seemed trivial, insignificant compared to the fragile lives he held in his embrace. He held Lily close, her sobs gradually subsiding into soft sniffles, while his gaze swept the room, searching for Mrs. Gable, a cold fury beginning to simmer beneath his shock. Just then, the door creaked open, and she appeared, her usually prim and proper uniform slightly askew, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips before her features settled into an expression of concern. "Oh, Mr. Thorne, you're back earlier than expected," she said, her voice smooth, almost saccharine, as she approached. "Is everything all right?" The children were just getting ready for their nap. Her eyes, however, held a glint of something sharper, something calculating that Elias now, with his newfound awareness, could not unsee. He felt a sudden, visceral revulsion, a chilling certainty that the woman before him was not the dedicated caregiver he had blindly trusted, but a wolf in sheep's clothing, her outward devotion a carefully crafted mask. Elias, still cradling Lily, turned to face her, his voice low and controlled, though a tremor of barely contained rage ran through it. "Mrs. Gable, what is this mark on Lily's arm? And why is Leo so distressed?" He gestured subtly towards the crib, where Leo's cries had lessened to a fretful whimper, but his tiny body still shook. Mrs. Gable's facade faltered for a split second, her eyes darting to the bruise, then back to Elias, a flicker of defiance crossing her face before she quickly composed herself. "Oh, that? The poor dear had a little tumble in the garden this morning," she explained, her tone laced with feigned sympathy. "And little Leo, he's just been a bit fussy today, perhaps missing his daddy." She offered a small, reassuring smile, but it didn't reach her eyes, which remained cold and distant, betraying the practiced warmth of her words. Elias watched her, a knot tightening in his stomach, knowing instinctively that her explanation was a fabrication, a flimsy veil over a much darker truth. He saw the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes avoided his direct gaze for just a fraction too long. All signals he would have dismissed before, but now screamed of deception. Over the next few days, Elias transformed from the absentee father into a vigilant sentinel, his senses acutely attuned to every nuance of his children's behavior and Mrs. Gable's actions. He noticed the way Lily flinched subtly when Mrs. Gable entered a room, the way her laughter died on her lips when the housekeeper's shadow fell across her play area. He observed doors in the children's wing mysteriously locked from the outside when he was momentarily out of sight, forcing him to use his master key. He heard Leo's cries, not the typical sounds of an infant needing attention, but piercing wails that spoke of fear and abandonment, often immediately silenced upon Mrs. Gable's approach, replaced by an unsettling quiet. The housekeeper, for her part, maintained her outwardly subservient demeanor, always appearing helpful and attentive when Elias was present. Yet her eyes would often linger on him with a peculiar mix of resentment and triumph, a silent challenge that fueled his growing suspicion. He started spending more time at home, canceling meetings, delegating responsibilities, his focus entirely consumed by the chilling puzzle unfolding within his own walls. One evening, as he tucked Lily into bed, she clutched a small, faded letter to her chest, her tiny fingers tracing the elegant script on the envelope. "Daddy, this is from Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Mrs. Gable told me I wasn't allowed to read it, that it was silly old paper, but I kept it." Elias took the aged parchment, his heart aching with a fresh wave of grief and regret. It was Clara's handwriting, unmistakable, a letter she had written to Lily shortly before Leo's arrival, full of love and hopes for their future. As he read, a particular passage caught his eye, a seemingly innocuous line about Mrs. Gable. Clara had written, "I sometimes worry about Mrs. Gable, my dear. She has a way of seeing things that isn't quite right, a bitterness that troubles me. I hope I am wrong, but please, always be careful, my sweet girl." A chill ran down Elias's spine. Clara, even in her delicate state, had seen it, a subtle warning he had been too blind, too consumed by his own sorrow, to heed. This was not just a housekeeper, but a woman with a history, a hidden agenda, and Clara's words were the first tangible clue, a whisper from the past, guiding him towards the truth he so desperately needed to uncover. The letter became his anchor, his resolve hardening with each passing minute, knowing he had to fight not just for his children, but also to honor the memory of their departed mother. The letter from Clara, a fragile whisper from the past, ignited a cold resolve in Elias, turning his grief into a potent fuel for action. He spent the following days in a state of heightened alert, his sharp business acumen now entirely directed towards safeguarding his home and his children. He pretended to resume his usual work schedule, making a show of leaving for the office each morning, only to return minutes later through a discreet service entrance, transforming his study into a clandestine observation post. From there, he watched, listened, and pieced together the fragments of a horrifying truth that had been hidden in plain sight. He saw Mrs. Gable initially maintaining her facade of diligent care, but as the hours stretched, and believing Elias truly absent, her true nature began to emerge, a venomous current beneath a placid surface. One afternoon, a chilling scene unfolded before his eyes through the slightly ajar nursery door he had strategically left. Lily, attempting to draw a picture, accidentally spilled a small cup of water on the pristine rug. Mrs. Gable appeared, her face a mask of controlled fury, her voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. "You clumsy, thoughtless child," she hissed, grabbing Lily's arm with a grip far too tight for an accident, her fingers leaving faint red marks. "Do you have any idea how much work you create? Do you know the value of cleanliness in a house like this? Lily's eyes welled with tears, her small body trembling, unable to utter a sound, paralyzed by fear. Mrs. Gable then forced the child to scrub at the damp spot with a harsh brush, her cruel words echoing the coldness of her heart, a stark contrast to the comforting presence she projected when Elias was around. Elias felt a surge of incandescent rage, his fists clenching, but he forced himself to remain hidden, knowing that a premature confrontation would only make things worse, potentially endangering his children further. He needed irrefutable evidence, a meticulously constructed case that would leave no room for doubt or escape. His observations revealed a disturbing pattern. Leo's formula bottles were often left unattended for extended periods, his cries growing increasingly desperate before Mrs. Gable would finally appear, her movements brusque, her eyes devoid of warmth. There were times when Elias saw her deliberately ignore Lily's pleas for attention, turning her back, leaving the little girl to retreat into a solitary world of quiet sadness. He noticed the children's meals, once carefully balanced and lovingly prepared, becoming sparse and unappetizing, often left unfinished as the children's appetites waned under the oppressive atmosphere. The locked doors in the children's wing, which he had initially dismissed as an overzealous attempt at security, now revealed their true, sinister purpose. He found Lily's beloved stuffed rabbit, a gift from Clara, inexplicably hidden away in a dusty closet, and when he gently returned it to her, the fear in her eyes was palpable, as if she expected punishment for possessing something precious. Each discovery was a fresh stab of guilt, a painful reminder of his own blind trust and emotional absence. Elias began to delve deeper, not just into Mrs. Gable's current actions, but into her past, guided by Clara's subtle warning. He instructed his most trusted private investigator, a man known for his discretion and thoroughness, to conduct a comprehensive background check, not just on Mrs. Gable, but on anyone who had been associated with her in a professional capacity. He wanted to understand the source of the bitterness Clara had perceived, to uncover the roots of this insidious cruelty. He spent his nights poring over financial statements, cross-referencing household expenses, and meticulously reviewing security footage from the property's external cameras, searching for any anomalies, any unauthorized entries or suspicious packages. His guilt, a heavy shroud that had weighed him down since Clara's departure, now transformed into a potent resolve, a fierce determination to not only protect his children, but to atone for his past failures. He understood now that true wealth was not measured in financial empires, but in the innocent laughter of his children, a sound he realized he had barely heard in far too long. During these solitary nights of investigation, Elias found himself gravitating towards Lily's room after she had fallen asleep. He would sit by her bed, watching her peaceful, albeit sometimes troubled, slumber, a profound ache in his chest. He would gently brush the hair from her forehead, his touch a silent promise of unwavering protection. He also spent more time with Leo, holding his infant son, feeling the warmth of his tiny body against his chest, a connection he had neglected for far too long. These quiet moments, filled with a raw, unconditional love, began to chip away at the emotional walls he had built around himself. He started reading to Lily every night, choosing stories of brave heroes and unwavering love, his voice a soothing balm against the subtle anxieties that still flickered in her eyes. He saw the faint signs of healing, the tentative return of a spark in Lily's spirit, a testament to the power of his renewed presence, a profound realization that his children needed him, not just his money, but his heart, his attention, his very being. The more he connected with them, the more fiercely he felt the need to dismantle the cruel regime Mrs. Gable had imposed upon their innocent lives. The investigation into Mrs. Gable's background began to yield unsettling results, painting a picture far darker than Elias could have imagined. His investigator uncovered a trail of past employment terminations, each vaguely citing breach of trust or unprofessional conduct, but never escalating to formal legal action, likely due to the victim's desire to avoid public scandal. There were whispers of petty theft, of unexplained disappearances of valuables from previous employers' homes, all unproven, yet contributing to a growing pattern of deceit. More disturbingly, there were records of a bitter custody battle years ago, involving Mrs. Gable and her estranged sister over a significant inheritance. Mrs. Gable had lost, a fact that seemed to fuel a deep-seated resentment and a sense of injustice. Elias realized that Clara's intuition had been tragically accurate. Mrs. Gable was not merely a disgruntled employee, but a woman consumed by a corrosive sense of entitlement and a twisted desire for retribution, seeing Elias's family as a means to settle scores with a world she perceived as having wronged her. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly but surely falling into place, revealing a web of manipulation and malice that chilled him to the bone. The further findings from Elias's trusted investigator solidified the grim picture of Mrs. Gable's past, revealing a pattern of calculated deceit and a chilling undercurrent of financial desperation. It wasn't just vague mentions of impropriety anymore. Specific instances began to surface, detailing how Mrs. Gable, under the guise of meticulous care, had subtly siphoned funds or valuables from previous, unsuspecting employers. One particularly disturbing report outlined a case where a frail, elderly woman had lost several irreplaceable heirlooms after Mrs. Gable's departure, items that were later pawned in a distant city under a false name, the proceeds untraceable. The investigator also uncovered a hidden, crippling debt Mrs. Gable had accrued, a consequence of a gambling habit she meticulously concealed, painting a vivid portrait of a woman driven by a corrosive blend of resentment and a desperate, insatiable need for money. This knowledge, coupled with Clara's prescient warning, transformed Elias's suspicion into an unshakable certainty, a cold anger that settled deep within his bones, strengthening his resolve to protect his children from this insidious threat. With the weight of this new information pressing upon him, Elias moved with a quiet, strategic precision he usually reserved for high-stakes corporate takeovers. He had discreet miniature cameras and audio recorders professionally installed throughout the children's wing and in his study, hidden within decorative objects and ventilation grates, transforming his opulent home into a silent, watchful sentinel. The footage he reviewed in the dead of night was damning, a horrifying tableau of Mrs. Gable's true nature. He witnessed her deliberately withholding Lily's favorite storybooks, tearing pages from them in a fit of pique when she thought no one was looking, reducing the little girl to quiet tears. He saw her ignore Leo's cries for comfort, leaving him alone in his crib for agonizing stretches, his tiny face red and streaked with tears, while she sat scrolling through her phone, her expression utterly devoid of empathy. The most painful revelation came when a camera in his study captured her, not just once, but repeatedly, rummaging through Clara's antique jewelry box, her fingers lingering on a pearl necklace, a beloved gift from Elias to his departed wife, her eyes gleaming with a covetousness that chilled him to the core. He knew then, with absolute clarity, that her malice was intertwined with a tangible desire for his family's possessions, a twisted form of financial retribution. As Elias continued his vigilant watch, he dedicated every spare moment to mending the fragile bonds with his children, pouring his heart into their shattered world. He spent hours with Lily, reading her stories, drawing pictures with her, and simply holding her close, allowing her to feel the warmth of his unwavering presence. Slowly, tentatively, Lily began to blossom under his renewed attention. One afternoon, while they built a towering castle of blocks, she leaned into him, her small voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the quiet pleas he had first overheard. "Daddy, Mrs. Gable would make me stand in the dark closet if I cried," she confessed, her eyes wide with a lingering fear. She said I was a bad girl for making noise, and sometimes she would take away my special blanket and say I didn't deserve nice things. Elias's heart fractured anew with each revelation, his arms tightening around her, his mind reeling from the cruelties inflicted upon his innocent daughter. He listened patiently, his every touch and word conveying a profound, unconditional love, a silent promise that such darkness would never touch her again. His increased presence and the subtle shift in the household atmosphere did not go unnoticed by Mrs. Gable. She became more guarded, her movements more deliberate, her eyes often darting suspiciously towards the very corners where Elias had installed his unseen sentinels. Her feigned concern for the children grew more elaborate, her smiles more practiced, almost mocking. She tried to dismiss Lily's occasional quietness as a child's natural shyness, or Leo's lingering fretfulness as teething pains, attempting to gaslight Elias into doubting his own observations. "Mr. Thorne, children can be so dramatic," she would say with a condescending chuckle. "Perhaps Lily just wants more attention." Elias, however, was no longer the emotionally distant man she had so easily manipulated. He met her gaze with an unwavering intensity, his silence a powerful counter to her hollow words. He also noticed small, almost imperceptible changes around the house. A valuable antique letter opener from his desk, subtly misplaced, a rare first-edition book from Clara's collection, shifted from its usual spot, all meticulously documented, all pointing to Mrs. Gable's continued, calculated pilfering. The mounting evidence, both emotional and tangible, solidified Elias's understanding of Mrs. Gable's motivations. A toxic brew of deep-seated resentment stemming from her past, perceived injustices, a desperate need for money to satisfy her undisclosed vices, and a chilling, almost sadistic pleasure in wielding power over the vulnerable. He realized that her cruelty was not merely a byproduct of neglect, but a deliberate, insidious campaign designed to punish him through his most precious treasures, his children. The image of the dedicated housekeeper had completely evaporated, replaced by the chilling reality of a manipulator, a thief, and an abuser. His guilt, once a heavy, paralyzing shroud, had now transformed into an unyielding force, a fierce determination to not only protect Lily and Leo, but to expose Mrs. Gable's malice for all to see. He knew the time for passive observation was nearing its end. The truth, armed with irrefutable proof, was ready to be unleashed, and justice, long overdue, would finally be served. The quiet, watchful period was over, and the path ahead promised confrontation, but also the profound hope of healing for his shattered family. The quiet, watchful period was indeed over, and Elias Thorne, a man once lost in the labyrinth of his own grief and ambition, now stood on the precipice of a battle for his children's very souls. His days were no longer consumed by corporate acquisitions, but by the meticulous acquisition of justice. He began to subtly challenge Mrs. Gable, testing her carefully constructed facade. One crisp morning, he approached her in the grand foyer, a seemingly innocuous question on his lips. "Mrs. Gable," he began, his voice calm, almost disarming, "I seem to have misplaced my late wife's pearl necklace. It's quite old, a family heirloom, and I distinctly remember seeing it in her jewelry box just before my last trip." His eyes, however, held a steel that belied his casual tone, fixed on her face, searching for any tell. Mrs. Gable's composure, usually unshakable, wavered for a fleeting moment, a micro-expression of panic crossing her features before she quickly masked it with feigned concern. "Oh, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice a little too bright. "I haven't touched anything in Mrs. Clara's personal effects. Perhaps it was put away for safekeeping." She offered a weak smile, but Elias saw the subtle tightening around her eyes, the way her fingers nervously smoothed the fabric of her apron, a clear indication of her discomfort. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgment of her lie, letting the unspoken accusation hang in the air, a new layer of tension settling between them. This was a war of wills, and Elias had just fired the first silent shot. The subtle confrontation only served to intensify Mrs. Gable's paranoia, making her more reckless in her perceived privacy. Believing Elias was once again engrossed in his study, she ventured into Clara's dressing room, her movements swift and furtive, caught perfectly by the hidden lens. Elias watched, his heart a cold knot in his chest, as she meticulously searched through drawers, her hands grasping at delicate silk scarves and antique trinkets, dismissing them with a sneer until her gaze landed on a small, velvet-covered diary tucked beneath a pile of linens. Clara had kept a journal, a private sanctuary for her thoughts and dreams, and Elias knew it contained not just cherished memories, but potentially crucial insights into Mrs. Gable's character, perhaps even the seeds of Clara's own suspicions. Mrs. Gable flipped through the pages with a malicious curiosity, her eyes scanning Clara's elegant script, a predatory glint in them as if she were desecrating a sacred space. Elias felt a profound sense of violation, not just for Clara, but for the sanctity of his family's memories, now being plundered by this insidious woman. He also noted her attempts to access secure financial documents he kept in a locked drawer in his study, her frustration evident as her attempts proved futile, confirming his investigators' findings about her desperate need for money. Meanwhile, the bond between Elias and his children grew stronger with each passing day, a vibrant tapestry woven from shared laughter and quiet comfort. Lily, emboldened by her father's unwavering presence and boundless affection, began to share more of her hidden fears, her small voice slowly gaining strength as she recounted the cruelties inflicted upon her. "Daddy," Mrs. Gable said, "if I told you about the dark closet, you wouldn't love me any more," she confessed one evening, nestled safely in his lap as he read her a bedtime story. "She said you were too busy for a naughty girl like me." Elias held her tighter, his own heart aching with the weight of her innocent pain, murmuring reassurances into her soft hair, promising her a love that was unconditional, a presence that was eternal. He learned of small indignities, like her favorite doll being deliberately broken, or her drawings torn up because they weren't perfect enough, all designed to chip away at her self-worth and spirit. Leo, too, began to thrive under his father's gentle care, his fretful cries replaced by gurgles of delight, his tiny hands reaching out to grasp Elias's finger, a silent testament to the healing power of unconditional love. Elias found himself rediscovering the profound joy of fatherhood, a joy he had once believed lost forever, realizing that these precious moments of connection were the true inheritance he needed to protect. The investigator's final report arrived, a thick dossier filled with irrefutable evidence that painted a damning portrait of Mrs. Gable's long history of calculated manipulation and financial malfeasance. It detailed her gambling debts, her systematic pilfering of valuables from previous employers, and even a forged document attempting to contest a distant relative's will, a clear pattern of greed driven by a corrosive sense of entitlement. The report also contained a chilling revelation. Mrs. Gable had, in fact, attempted to manipulate Clara's will shortly after her departure, planting false information about Elias's supposed neglect to try and gain control of certain trust funds designated for the children. This discovery solidified Elias's understanding of her deep-seated resentment, a twisted belief that she deserved a share of his wealth, seeing herself as a victim of a system that had denied her what she believed was rightfully hers. The pieces of the puzzle were now complete, forming a horrifying mosaic of betrayal, abuse, and calculated malice, leaving no room for doubt or rationalization. Elias knew then that the time for subtle challenges was over. The moment for decisive action had arrived, and he would not rest until justice was served, not just for his children, but for Clara's memory. The weight of the evidence, coupled with the profound emotional reconnection with his children, galvanized Elias into action. He contacted his legal team, a formidable group of litigators known for their unwavering resolve and strategic brilliance. He presented them with the hidden camera footage, the investigators' detailed report, Clara's warning letter, and Lily's brave, tearful testimonies. The lawyers, initially skeptical of a domestic dispute involving a long-standing housekeeper, were quickly convinced by the sheer volume and undeniable nature of the proof. They assured him that Mrs. Gable's actions constituted not only theft and breach of trust, but also severe child endangerment and emotional abuse, charges that would carry significant legal consequences. Elias watched the footage one last time, seeing Mrs. Gable's face contort in a sneer as she tore Lily's drawing, hearing her cruel whispers, witnessing her deliberate neglect of Leo. A cold, righteous fury settled deep within him, replacing the last vestiges of his guilt. He was ready to face her, not as a grieving widower, but as a father fiercely protective of his children, ready to expose her malicious deeds to the light of truth, ensuring that her reign of cruelty would come to a definitive, irreversible end. The confrontation would be public, the revelations undeniable, and the path to justice, though arduous, would ultimately lead to the restoration of peace and love within his home. The morning arrived with a crisp, unforgiving clarity, mirroring the resolve that had hardened in Elias's heart. He had spent the night reviewing the meticulously compiled dossier, each page a testament to Mrs. Gable's calculated cruelty, each photograph a silent scream of his children's suffering. His legal team, a formidable trio of seasoned professionals, arrived precisely at 9, their expressions grave, yet confident. They outlined the strategy, a swift and decisive action designed to minimize further trauma to Lily and Leo, while ensuring Mrs. Gable faced the full weight of justice. The plan was simple, yet potent. A formal presentation of the evidence, followed by a demand for her immediate removal and a full legal prosecution. Elias felt a profound sense of purpose, a burning desire to cleanse his home of the insidious darkness that had permeated its walls, to reclaim the innocence that had been so cruelly threatened. The confrontation unfolded in Elias's grand study, a room usually reserved for complex business negotiations, now transformed into an arena of truth. Mrs. Gable was summoned, her usual composed demeanor betraying a faint unease as she entered to find Elias, his legal team, and a palpable tension filling the air. She offered a practiced smile, a brittle mask of subservience. "Is everything all right, Mr. Thorne?" she inquired, her voice a little too sweet, her eyes darting between the stern faces of the lawyers. Elias met her gaze, his own eyes cold and unwavering, devoid of the emotional distance she had once exploited. He held up a single photograph, a still from the hidden camera footage, showing her tearing Lily's drawing, her face contorted in a sneer. "Mrs. Gable," he stated, his voice low and steady, "your tenure in this home, and indeed your presence in our lives, ends today." The carefully constructed facade of Mrs. Gable shattered instantly, revealing the raw, venomous resentment simmering beneath. Her face contorted, not in fear, but in a grotesque mockery of offense, her eyes blazing with an unholy fire. "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Thorne?" she shrieked, her voice rising, cracking with a sudden, uncontrolled fury that ripped through the quiet dignity of the room. "How dare you accuse me, after all I have done for this family, for your children, especially after your wife's departure, when you were too busy to care." Her words, meant to wound, only strengthened Elias's resolve, confirming the depth of her malice and her twisted perception of reality. She began to pace, her movements agitated, her hands clenching and unclenching, her accusations growing wilder, a torrent of self-pity and blame directed squarely at Elias. "You were never there," she spat, her voice laced with a bitter scorn. "You left them to me, a wealthy man too absorbed in his empire to see what was right under his nose." Elias remained impassive, allowing her outburst to run its course, knowing that every word, every uncontrolled gesture was further condemning her. One of his lawyers, a woman with eyes like steel, calmly placed a stack of documents on the polished mahogany desk, each page detailing the investigator's findings, the financial irregularities, the history of deceit. She then activated a small tablet, displaying a sequence of images from the hidden cameras. Mrs. Gable neglecting Leo, the purplish mark on Lily's wrist, her hands rummaging through Clara's jewelry box. The visual evidence, stark and undeniable, hit Mrs. Gable like a physical blow. Her tirade faltered, her eyes widening in disbelief, then narrowing in a desperate scramble for denial. "Those are fabrications," she cried, her voice now tinged with panic. "Lies! You're trying to ruin me!" But her words lacked conviction, her body trembling with a sudden, stark realization that her carefully crafted world of deception had irrevocably crumbled. The legal team, with quiet authority, informed her of the charges: child endangerment, emotional abuse, theft, and attempted manipulation of a will. They explained the irrefutable evidence, the testimonies, the recordings, the financial trails. Mrs. Gable's face, once a mask of feigned concern, now became a canvas of raw, unbridled rage and terror. She lunged forward, her hands reaching for the tablet, as if to destroy the damning images, but was swiftly, yet calmly, intercepted by a security detail Elias had discreetly positioned outside the study. Her struggles were brief, undignified, a pathetic display of a cornered predator. The air crackled with her final desperate defiance, a chilling testament to the depth of her bitterness. "You will regret this, Mr. Thorne!" she screamed, her voice hoarse as she was escorted from the room, her threat echoing hollowly in the sudden silence that followed. In the aftermath, a profound stillness settled over the mansion, a silence not of absence, but of peace. Elias immediately went to Lily's room, finding her playing quietly with Leo, who gurgled happily in his playpen. He knelt beside her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "It's over, my sweet girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Mrs. Gable is gone, and she will never hurt you again." Lily looked up at him, her eyes still holding a flicker of apprehension, but also a burgeoning hope, a fragile trust slowly beginning to mend. She hugged him back, her small arms wrapping tightly around his neck, a silent affirmation of their newfound connection. Elias knew the path to complete healing would be long and arduous, but in that moment, holding his children close, he felt a profound sense of relief, a deep-seated belief that the darkness had been banished, and a new dawn, filled with unconditional love and unwavering protection, was finally breaking over their lives. The formal proceedings would follow, a necessary step towards official justice, but the most crucial battle, the one for his children's safety and his own redemption, had already been fought and won within the walls of his heart and home. The subsequent weeks were a crucible for Elias, a relentless march through the formal labyrinth of justice, but he faced it with an unyielding resolve, born from a father's fierce love. The courtroom, usually a cold and impersonal space, became an arena where the truth, meticulously gathered, was laid bare for all to witness. Elias, always impeccably composed, sat through hours of testimony, his eyes fixed on the proceedings, every fiber of his being focused on securing protection for his children. His legal team presented the hidden camera footage, the chilling images of Mrs. Gable's cruelty projected onto a large screen. Her sneering face, her deliberate neglect, her covetous hands rifling through Clara's cherished possessions, all undeniable proof of her malice. The investigators' detailed reports, tracing her history of deceit and financial impropriety, painted a damning portrait of a woman driven by a corrosive blend of resentment and greed, systematically preying on the vulnerable. Elias felt a profound sorrow for the years of blindness, but also a burgeoning strength, a quiet pride in his unwavering commitment to his children's future. Lily, though spared the direct trauma of the courtroom, had provided a poignant, pre-recorded testimony. Her small voice, once barely a whisper of fear, now carrying the weight of innocent truth. Her words, relayed by a child psychologist, spoke of the dark closet, the broken doll, the torn drawings, and the cruel words that had chipped away at her spirit, all delivered with an emotional honesty that moved even the most hardened members of the court. Elias listened, his heart aching anew, but also swelling with pride for his brave daughter, knowing that her courage, however fragile, was a vital part of this quest for justice. The evidence against Mrs. Gable was overwhelming, a tidal wave of proof that left no room for doubt or denial, each piece meticulously placed, each revelation a hammer blow against her carefully constructed facade of dedication. The legal team argued passionately, emphasizing not just the theft and manipulation, but the profound emotional and physical endangerment inflicted upon two innocent children, a betrayal of the deepest trust. When Mrs. Gable finally took the stand, her composure, once a weapon of manipulation, had completely disintegrated. Her eyes, sunken and desperate, darted wildly around the room, a cornered animal facing its inevitable fate. She attempted to deny everything, her voice shrill and trembling, weaving a tangled web of lies and self-pity, blaming Elias for his perceived absence, for his wealth, for everything she felt she had been denied. It was a final, desperate outburst, a pathetic display of a woman consumed by her own bitterness and entitlement. She launched into a venomous tirade, her words a torrent of accusations against Elias, against Clara's memory, even against the children, portraying herself as the true victim, burdened by a demanding family and an ungrateful employer. But her words rang hollow, lacking the conviction to pierce through the mountain of irrefutable evidence, her once convincing subservience now replaced by a raw, ugly rage that solidified the court's perception of her true character. The verdict, when it finally came, was swift and unequivocal. Mrs. Gable was found guilty on multiple counts, including child endangerment, emotional abuse, theft, and attempted manipulation of Clara's will. The judge, in delivering the sentence, spoke with a solemn gravity about the profound breach of trust, the calculated cruelty, and the devastating impact on vulnerable lives, emphasizing that such malicious acts would not go unpunished. Elias felt a wave of profound relief wash over him, a deep exhale of years of suppressed grief and recent terror. It was not a moment of triumph or celebration, but of profound justice, a quiet affirmation that the insidious darkness had been unequivocally banished. The formal proceedings would ensure Mrs. Gable would face the full consequences of her actions, removing her permanently from any position to harm another family. He knew the legal battle was but one part of a larger journey, but it was a crucial step, clearing the path for the true work of healing to begin. In the immediate aftermath of the verdict, Elias dedicated himself entirely to nurturing the fragile spirits of Lily and Leo, transforming their home into a sanctuary of warmth and unwavering affection. The mansion, once a place that echoed with his own emotional distance and the chilling whispers of abuse, now vibrated with a renewed sense of peace and joyful possibility. He spent countless hours with Lily, reading her favorite stories, now complete and untorn. Their pages filled with adventures and happy endings. They drew together, their crayons dancing across paper, creating vibrant worlds where no one was ever sad or afraid. He taught her how to tend to the small rose garden Clara had cherished, their hands working together in the rich soil, a tangible act of nurturing new life and growth, a quiet ritual of healing and remembrance. Lily, slowly but surely, began to shed the lingering shadows of fear, her laughter ringing freely through the grand halls, her small hand instinctively reaching for her father's, a testament to the rebuilding of trust. Leo, now a thriving toddler, blossomed under Elias's constant, loving presence. His days were filled with playful gurgles and delighted squeals, his tiny steps following Elias wherever he went, a constant, joyful reminder of the precious life he had almost overlooked. Elias would spend evenings rocking Leo gently, singing soft lullabies, feeling the warmth of his son's small body against his chest, a profound connection forming between them that transcended words. He had learned to truly see his children, to hear their unspoken needs, to cherish every fleeting moment of their innocent joy. The house, once a monument to his solitary ambition, was now filled with the vibrant energy of a family truly alive, truly connected. Elias knew that healing was a continuous journey, but he walked it with a heart full of purpose, a love that was fiercely protective, and an unwavering commitment to the happiness and safety of his beloved children. The past, though painful, served as a poignant reminder of the preciousness of their bond, a bond he would fiercely guard forever. 2 years unfurled like a gentle spring, washing away the last lingering shadows from the Thorne mansion. The grand house, once a silent testament to Elias's solitary ambition and a crucible of hidden sorrow, now vibrated with a symphony of laughter and the warm embrace of unconditional love. Elias, no longer the distant titan of industry, had fully embraced his most cherished role, a father, present, and profoundly devoted. His mornings no longer began with urgent calls from overseas, but with the joyful patter of small feet racing down the hallway, Lily and Leo vying for his attention, their faces alight with unburdened happiness. Lily, now a bright and confident 8-year-old, bloomed like one of Clara's cherished roses, her spirit entirely mended. She would often be found in the sun-drenched conservatory, her small fingers carefully tending to delicate orchids, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she hummed a tune, a stark contrast to the timid, fearful child she once was. "Daddy, look," she would exclaim, holding up a newly sprouted leaf. "It's growing so fast, just like us." Leo, a robust and cheerful toddler, filled the home with boundless energy, his infectious giggles echoing through the spacious rooms. He chased after Lily, his tiny legs pumping furiously, or sat contentedly on Elias's lap during mealtimes, babbling stories only his father seemed to fully understand, his small hands reaching for a piece of bread, his eyes shining with pure, innocent joy. Elias would watch them, his heart overflowing with a gratitude so profound it often brought a quiet tear to his eyes. He had found his true wealth not in boardrooms or stock portfolios, but in the vibrant, beating hearts of his children, a treasure more precious than any fortune. Their evenings were spent gathered around the fireplace, Elias reading aloud, their voices blending in comfortable harmony, a perfect picture of a family rebuilt, resilient, and deeply connected. The legacy he now sought to build was one of love, protection, and unwavering presence, a promise whispered to the memory of Clara and lived out every single day for Lily and Leo. The mansion, once a symbol of his emotional absence, had been transformed into a haven, a place where memories of sorrow were replaced by the vibrant tapestry of new joys. Elias had learned that justice was not merely a courtroom verdict, but a continuous act of rebuilding, of nurturing, of ensuring that truth and love would always prevail. He had faced his own profound failures, confronted the darkness that had threatened his family, and emerged a man wholly transformed, his heart finally whole. What would you do to ensure a child's safety and happiness, to protect the innocent light within them? How would you rebuild a world shattered by betrayal? And what power would you draw upon to heal the deepest wounds? Think about the strength of unconditional love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering courage it takes to stand for truth. These are the stories that remind us that even in the darkest corners, light will always find a way to bloom, guiding us towards a future filled with hope and profound connection.